We are live.
All right, we're reconvening our morning meeting and continuing interest in effluent. Welcome, Jamina Shupak from the Rich Earth Institute.
There. Just go ahead and get started.
Yes, please.
Okay. My apologies for not being in there in person. That is definitely my preferred way to engage with the world and to present this information, but couldn't quite make it work today. Maybe
No
next
worries.
time. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Are you seeing that okay?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm Jamina Shupak. I'm the Executive Director of Rich Earth Institute. Our mission here is to engage in research, education, and technological innovation to advance the use of human waste as a resource. And I will be giving an overview today of our organization and our spinoff company, Brightwater Tools, answer some frequently asked questions that I know are of interest to this committee, mention some current challenges, and go over some current and upcoming projects. My co-director, Abe Noe Hayes, who's also our research director, will be joining us for the Q&A. So stay tuned, and he's going to be the one that's going to have the best technological answers to things and scientific answers. So excited for him to join us a little bit later. Before I get going, I can kind of see folks there. Can I get a quick raise of hands for folks who are already pretty familiar with our work to get a sense of how much to lean into the overview part?
I know I'm probably the most familiar, but it's been a couple years for me, so I think starting from scratch will be really great. And I guess I'm wondering if there's any way, can you get a little closer to your mic or maybe use a mic? That would be helpful.
I have a mic here. Let's make sure that it is what it is picking up here. Is that any better?
Maybe a little. Yeah, right. Maybe a little.
Wait, hang on. I got a plan. I might need to stop. All right. 1 second.
Like, is it? Have we decided that there's no difference if you hit
your microphone?
Sometimes it helps.
Okay, how is that?
I think that's a little bit better. Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's go from there. Okay, thanks for the ask. Okay, so I'll start from the get-go, which was the plan anyway, but just wanted to get a sense of who was in the room. So here at Rich Earth, the main thing that we do is we turn urine into fertilizer. And the reason we do that is the current system of waste stream is really a linear system. It was designed at a time where the main purpose of it was to weed out disease, right? So to keep communities safe. And it really does that. And over time, the asks that we've had of our waste streams has really expanded exponentially. And I think we think it's really time to be rethinking how we're doing that with how many inputs there are in our waste streams. And so the current system, as I said, is linear. And so we tend to fertilize crops with synthetic fertilizer that also emits greenhouse gases. We grow our crops, humans, we eat these crops, we excrete our waste, and then the nutrients and the pharmaceuticals still go into our waste streams and into our waterways. And that's actually causing quite a bit of pollution. The nitrogen and the phosphorus are adding to the algal blooms that are becoming more and more common every year, especially in places like Lake Champlain, Cape Cod area, Long Island Sound, and the Michigan lakes as well. The Great Lakes are also seeing a lot of these. And that's to name just a few. And so what we're trying to do is really close this circle and really mirror and mimic nature in a much bigger way. And so after we eat, we collect the the urine that we produce, we treat it so that it still has that safety element, of course. And then we use that to fertilize in lieu of synthetic fertilizers. And then we're still growing those crops. And so we really came to this work with an eye on preventing the pollution and to reclaim those nutrients. But you can't just keep it out of the waterway and do nothing with it, right? You can't just hoard piles of urine. That's a very bad plan. And so the simplest way that needs the least amount of treatment to then use the urine is going to be fertilizer. And the urine that we produce is actually quite powerful. We produce, sorry, I'm backing up. We produce enough fertilizer, enough nitrogen every single day to grow the wheat needed to make a loaf of bread. And so that's quite powerful. And the other reason why we're focusing on the urine is in terms of volume, it makes up a very small amount of the volume of our waste stream, but it's responsible for the vast majority of the nutrients and about half of the micropollutants and pharmaceuticals. And so it's a great place to start. It's not the end solution, but it's a great place to start and focus on and start removing that from our waterways. And so, as I mentioned a moment ago, out of order, my apologies, is that we grow enough fertilizer to grow a full grow the wheat for a full loaf of bread every single day. And so here in Brattleboro, we have a demonstration project that we call the Urine Nutrient Reclamation Program, or UNRP down here. And it's the first and largest community scale program of its kind in the US. We collect about 13,500 gallons of urine from our donors. To date, since our inception in 2012, we have saved 2.7 million gallons of clean water from being flushed down the drain. And this program really is the platform for our research and our education. It's quite rare to have access to this much urine to work with, and for it to be fully, of course, permitted. And so once we collect the urine, in order to get it from collection all the way to the farms, it has to go through this process. So we have a number of methods of collection. We have folks who have sort of portable urine containers that they bring to our local depot. We have two depots, one in Brattleboro and one in Bellows Falls at the Rockingham Recycling Center. We have many folks who have installed systems that are plumbed in their homes, that go into a large tank. And then we also have a portable toilet fleet that goes to events and weddings and construction sites, anywhere you would see a portable toilet system. We have those there. And so we collect the urine from these various places. We transport it back to our facility where it is treated currently through pasteurization, but stay tuned, we're working on some other things. And then eventually applied in lieu of synthetic fertilizer to local farms. And I do want to mention that all of these activities, collection, transport, treatment, and application are all fully permitted through Vermont DEC Waste Management and Prevention Division. Here's just some pictures from some of our farm partners and some of the trials that we have done. So here in Brattleboro, we're working on a pretty small scale, and we're lucky to have hundreds of urine donors who are interested in contributing in the way that they are. It does take commitment, and we're so grateful for that. And it works in this community, and it works at this scale. And we have farmers who are close by that this system is functional. When we start to look beyond Brattleboro, Vermont, and into bigger communities and larger infrastructure, there's a need for other technologies actually to be at play. And so back in 2019, we formed a spin-off company called Brightwater Tools, and their mission is to design, build, and sell technologies for nutrient recovering wastewater treatment. So Rich Earth is still continuing to focus on research and demonstration, while Brightwater is focused on product development and commercialization. Before we look at their treatment train that they're working on, I do want to point out that they have pilot units currently in Michigan, Vermont, Washington State, Massachusetts, and Europe. They're currently a team of 9, including 6 engineers, many of whom have moved to the Brattleboro area specifically for the job at Brightwater Tools. Just as a side note, Rich Earth is we're currently 10 employees, many of whom also moved to Brattleboro for this position, for this work. Brightwater is beginning to branch into other waste streams, such as food waste resource recovery. And so far, they've attracted $1.5 million of National Science Fund funding and an additional $1 million in private investment funds, both from within Vermont and externally. And so let's take a look at their treatment train. So as I mentioned, we here in Brattleboro pasteurize our urine. It's to get rid of the pathogens. It's a pretty simple and brilliant process, if I may, that uses very low energy and heats up the urine to 80 degrees Celsius for about 90 seconds, making it completely safe for use as fertilizer. Urine is very voluminous. It has a lot of water. And so Brightwater has been working on this freeze concentrator, and that is now in production and being used elsewhere. And this is able to reduce the volume of the urine currently by about 8 times. And then some other pieces that they're working on are the charcoal filter, which would reduce pharmaceuticals, and then a struvite reactor, because what's in urine is largely nitrogen, but also quite a bit of phosphorus. And depending on where you are, you either want the phosphorus or you don't want the phosphorus. So such as in Lake Champlain Basin, there's actually already plenty of phosphorus. In fact, too much phosphorus on the land there. And so if you're collecting the urine, you actually don't want to be adding phosphorus to that soil. And so this will remove the phosphorus component, the struvite of the urine, and that can be applied elsewhere. And then what you're applying is actually just the nitrogen. We have some partners up in the Burlington area called Wasted. Maybe you've seen their portable toilets about, and they have a lot of this technology, but they have a struvite reactor so that the urine that they collect from their portable toilets is not going onto the land up there. I do want to mention for a moment that Wasted is a company that formed a few years back to be an alternative sanitation solution in the portable toilet space, and they were going to form in California, but they couldn't fit the permitting was not already navigated over there, and so they actually moved their operation here to Vermont, where we were able to support them in navigating the permitting system, which was a really cool moment for us. So here's sort of a simplified version of the Brightwater Tools treatment train. So there would be collection fixtures. These are not being developed by Brightwater. There are currently fixtures from Europe that divert urine or are vacuum flush for everything that goes down the toilet. We are in communication with some fixture manufacturers here in the States who are working on some options here, but I think we're a few years out. And then that freeze concentrator is reducing the volume, the pasteurizer is destroying the pathogens, and the carbon filter is removing the pharmaceuticals, leaving you with a concentrated, sanitized fertilizer product. So coming back to Rich Earth, as I mentioned, the urine that we collect serves as our foundation for our research trials and our education. And so every year we are partnering with universities, we are applying for large research grants. Here's a list of some of our current funding and our current partners. University of Michigan has been a longstanding partner of ours, Cornell University, Cornell Extension, University at Buffalo, and we are working on some big projects with them, which we'll talk about in a moment. And our field trials are really to serve to push the knowledge of the space further. I'm sure you have questions about pharmaceuticals and forever chemicals, and how do you apply the urine without losing a lot of the nitrogen to the air? We have those same questions, and so we work every year to get closer and closer to having all the answers. And so one of our first trials that we did was just to look at the effect of fertilizer on hay fields and hay yields, in comparison to synthetic fertilizer and of course no fertilizer. And what we found, which has been a bedrock of our work since then, is that it's really comparable to synthetic fertilizer. And so to be able to fully replace synthetic fertilizer with urine is clearly an option. So we've been operating since then, knowing that. We have a large education branch. Locally, we do a lot of classroom education, tours of our facilities. We also will travel for class presentations. We have a whole webinar series. One of our most common ones is Urine My Garden. And so that's helping folks understand how to use urine in their own garden. Because here in Brattleboro, collecting and contributing to our program is an option, but many, many places that is not. But people are still interested in not adding urine to their waste streams, to their septic system, to saving water so they're not flushing as much, and to accessing that free local resource that they're providing themselves of that fertilizer. And so we host webinars to help folks understand how to do that. We also have a community science survey for them to tell us what they're finding. So to expand the knowledge in this space in another way. And we recently presented on what people were finding, which was really wonderful to feel part of a much bigger community. And then speaking of part of a bigger community, we have an annual summit, which started with about 15 people in the living room of one of our co-founders' home, and it has grown. This is going to be our 11th year. It's now a hybrid event. We have about 200 people attend from 30 different countries. We are so not the only ones working on this, and it's so incredible to connect with those folks every year, at least once a year, and hear what other projects are finding and doing and making happen. So that's a brief overview of Rich Earth itself and Brightwater Tools. We've got our demonstration project where we're collecting the urine and showing that they really can be done and people are interested to commit to doing it. We have our research trials pushing the knowledge forward, and we have our education. And so what I want to dive into a bit now is some of the findings and some of the current research. And so I know when I talked to Amy the other week that the pharmaceuticals question was definitely a question that this team would likely have. And so what happens with the pharmaceuticals in our urine? So before we look at what we found in our process, I think it's important to look at what's happening currently in our existing linear system. So when you take medicine or drink coffee and then flush your pee, what happens to it? It goes into the toilet and into the septic or into the sewer, and it makes its way into the waterways. And it's causing quite a bit of problems, especially with aquatic life. And so when reclaimed as a fertilizer, it still goes into the urine, but it's not going into the waterways in the same way. And we had the same questions that you probably do, which are, do these compounds end up in edible crops, and how do they affect the long-term soil health? So we did a 6-year study with a few partners. And what we found was that in terms of the plant, we could measure a little bit of pharmaceuticals in the plants. We actually spiked the urine with extra pharmaceuticals to really try to sort of take it to the extreme. And we found that that there were very, very low levels. And so what I mean by that is if you'd have to eat 1 pound of urine fertilized lettuce every day for 1,000 years to ingest the equivalent of 1 large cup of coffee. The other way to look at that is the levels are actually below what they are for irrigation water in California. So they're already in places as seen as safe levels. We did also find pharmaceuticals in the soil, once again, very, very low levels. We are currently doing a research trial in collaboration with Cornell University and University of Michigan and Cornell Extension to look at the long-term soil implications of soil health. So that's a 5-year study, and we're and I'll let Abe, when he comes, to share a little bit about what we're finding there. We did also find it in the groundwater, but once again, very low levels, even lower than rainwater. I think it's important at this point in our world to recognize that there isn't really a place anymore that is totally pure. These things are everywhere. And I think the challenge for us is to figure out what safe levels are, as I'm sure is something that you guys think about a lot. And how do we mitigate those risks? So we are also thinking about those things quite a bit. Another question we get a lot is what about the ick factor? Aren't people grossed out by this?
Would you be okay with questions during the presentation?
Sure. Actually, Abe is actually in the room, so let's go ahead and have him join in. And let's pause here for questions, and then I can continue on. Do you want to hop onto the Zoom call and then?
Oh, sure. I'll stay over here.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Let's go ahead and pause for a couple questions, and then we can continue on a little bit.
Great, thanks. Representative North.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for this presentation. It's very informative. Question on this study that was conducted here on the amount of pharmaceuticals and other things that end up in the crops. Was where it says each pound of urine fertilized lettuce, did you use raw urine to fertilize this, or was this after the product had been processed through the Brightwater processing facility and concentrated and then reapplied?
Great question. This was just with pasteurized urine. So it wasn't concentrated and it hadn't gone through that carbon filter for removal of pharmaceuticals. It had just been pasteurized.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Any other questions at this point?
Representative Pritchard.
After this process is done, what would a gallon of your fertilizer cost?
That's a great question. We started this process, I would say, really not thinking about selling the fertilizer. Oh, I can admit you. That's fine. Sorry. Hello, Abe. I'm going to pause for a second and just introduce Abe Noe Hayes. He's a co-director here and our research director, and he'll be he'll be using my mic, so he'll look like he's muted, but you'll still hear him. And so we really started this operation back in 2012 without really thinking about selling the fertilizer. It was really just to keep the waterways from having those nutrients. And only recently have we been really considering what we could sell it for. And so we have sold some of it, and I have to pull up a little price sheet, but we priced what, $100 for 250 gallons.
Yeah, so a little under 50 cents a gallon.
Yeah, and that's sort of based off of comparing two comparable fertilizers and their nitrogen content. That is not really taking into account everything that it takes us to acquire that urine. This has been so grant funded that we haven't fully done that work. That is work that we are really wanting to do in the near future to understand the economic case for this. And I think that's a space we have a lot of growth to make. And Abe, if you want to pipe in there.
Yeah, I would add to that it's remarkable that there is a product. This is a wastewater management process, and it's remarkable that the end product of that process has a dollar value, that it's worth enough to sell and distribute to farms. Most wastewater treatment just costs money and doesn't produce anything of value. It just produces other wastes or improved wastes. So it's important to thinking of the economics of urine recycling, to realize that it is not likely to be a money-making business collecting urine and recycling it into fertilizer, but it is a way of managing waste that can be more economical than conventional wastewater treatment, and that can result in a product that has value at the end. So all wastewater treatment costs money. We don't do it because it makes money. We do it because we need to manage the wastewater. And so this is still in that vein, but it does have a product that people want and that they'll pay for, which is very different from biosolids. People will accept them, but no one pays for biosolids from wastewater treatment, whereas they do pay for urine.
So is there somehow been thoughts of incorporating this into wastewater management at that scale?
Well, a urine recycling facility could be co-located at a wastewater facility. So it could be like at a wastewater facility that's a large on-site facility serving serving, say, a condominium development or a you know, a mobile home development, or you know, places that have their small community facilities. It could also be at the municipal facility, and the urine can be hauled there. We're working with partners in Massachusetts, in Cape Cod, particularly Falmouth, on Cape Cod, to implement urine diversion, because it'll be a much more cost-effective way for them to manage their nitrogen problem, which is a huge problem and a huge economic crisis for them. And they are likely to co-locate that at a wastewater plant because of the permitting, because of the infrastructure, and it'll be integrated into the municipal wastewater management plan.
Thank you.
We are also in talks in Franklin County at some wastewater treatment plants there of potentially collaborating with a project, also co-located at a wastewater treatment plant.
Franklin County, Massachusetts.
Yes, Franklin County, Massachusetts. I apologize.
All
Other
right,
questions?
I think carry on.
Great. So I was about to get into the ick factor realm, which gets us into our social research branch. So all of our research trials have a social research component. As you can imagine, a lot of folks want to know what people think about this. Are farmers open to this concept? Are consumers open to eating crops that were grown with urine fertilized, that were urine fertilized? And so these are questions that we ask folks. We hold dialogue groups. We hold interviews. We do co-design workshops, et cetera. And what we find is that there's actually a lot more openness to this than we originally thought there might be. We found that there's sort of this idea of ascribed attitudes. If you talk to one neighbor and you say, with a little bit of context, you know, here's what we're thinking of doing. What do you think about this concept? Give some insight into the issues that are currently happening in the wastewater streams. And often the answer will be, I think that's really interesting and really cool, but I bet you my neighbor Bob thinks that's pretty gross. And then you go to the neighbor Bob and you say, hey, same thing. This is what we're looking at. What do you think? They say, I think that's really quite cool, but I bet you my neighbor thinks it's really gross. And so there's sort of this assumption that other people are going to find it gross. But once, what we find with all those populations, especially farmers who are used to working with things that smell bad, or, you know, manure, like those aren't pleasant things to work with, et cetera, is that with a bit of education and understanding where the issues are and where the issues will eventually be. I think there's a lot of communities where this is a pressing matter now, like in Cape Cod, and there's communities where this is going to become a pressing matter as water issues become more emergent. And so the feedback we mainly get is, I'd like a little bit more education about this, or I'd like a really strong resource so I'm understanding how to apply it, so I'm being safe. It would be great if it was fully, if there was like a certification process, so that the product I'm getting, especially if it's, you know, not from us, if it's from another company down the line that's using Brightwater Tools technology, so that it's all certified and clearly safe. And so that's where the desire is, not really from the like, ew, urine. And so I've included some quotes here from our community science survey of folks who are using this in their gardens and finding a lot of success, a lot of improved growth, even finding some less insect damage, which is really exciting. So, of course, this is not just smooth sailing. We've been doing this since 2012, and it's a slow process. And some major reasons for that is it's challenging to create new regulatory pathways for things that aren't already categorized in the regulations and in the rules, right? And so we have figured out regulation pathways and permitting pathways in Vermont, but it's taken quite a bit of time. And it's the newness of it is challenging, right? There isn't a box that says, are you collecting urine for fertilizer? We have to create that conversation. We have to show that science. We need to build those relationships. And so we've done that in Vermont. And then as we're looking at expanding into new communities in other states, other counties, et cetera, that continues to be a challenge and a lot of work and work that we're going to continue doing, but hard. Consistent funding can be challenging, especially in this moment. We've relied pretty heavily on research grants in the past, and we're unclear looking forward how real that will be as an option. And so we're doing a lot of work internally right now about how to create more consistency in our funding to continue this work. And then the other sort of big picture challenge is creating alternatives within an embedded infrastructure. If we're looking at, there's so much that's already gone into the sewer systems and the septic systems, and so to step out of that and create alternatives that really function with the fixtures and the transport and the service members, right? You need plumbers who know how to access these things. It's just a lot of pieces to that puzzle. And so once again, that's stuff that we're working on, and we're not naive to the challenges of those things. Some things happening right now. As I mentioned a few times, we have more field trials happening, and the one that we're doing in collaboration with University of Michigan and Cornell Extension and Cornell University is related to using a combination of biochar and urine, and biochar from biosolids as part of that trial, also biochar from other organic matter. And we're looking at forever chemicals in that trial. We're also looking at the soil health over time. And of course, we're doing a social research component there as well. And I'll let Abe answer questions about that. I'm sure that exists, and sort of speak a little bit more about what we're finding so far. We have a system called a Petrobon, which is out here from technology really developed in France. And it's a method of stabilizing the ammonia within the urine. And so the urine passes through a carbon column, and once we have it dialed in quite right, you'll have a product at the end that is much more stable than just fresh urine. And so you're going to lose a lot less ammonia during application. It also doesn't smell, which is very exciting and intriguing to us. So the possibilities there are feeling really exciting. We're doing a lot of upgrades to our local infrastructure. Our depots are getting upgraded this year. Our research center, some long awaited upgrades, some farm equipment, and some portable toilet processing. We're also doing a lot of consulting and developing resources for new communities. So as Abe was mentioning, we're working with Cape Cod and some folks up in Lake Champlain and Franklin County in Massachusetts. So not just in Vermont, but really developing those. Was there a question or just a cough?
Not yet. That was a cough.
Just
Okay.
two coughs.
2 coughs. No worries. And so some of the resources that we've been developing, in addition to the consulting work that we're doing, is we have a whole guide to starting a community scale urine diversion program. And then we also just added a farmer guide to fertilizing with urine. And so looking forward, we are going to continue doing a lot of this work of supporting new communities. That's feeling really exciting. And we are interested in developing our regional solids composting infrastructure, and we're seeing a direct correlation between our ability to develop that and disaster preparedness. So let me back up for a second, because that's a whole new thing. So we have been focused on urine, as I said, but because we have a portable toilet fleet, we also have access to solids, and they're solids that have not been through the sewer system. So it's just urine and solids and toilet paper really is all that's there, plus wood shavings. And we are permitted to collect those on site and compost them and then apply those as well as we are with our urine. We started doing that because of our portable toilet fleet, but then we also found that there are a number of people in the region who have composting toilets, but don't actually want to manage the solids on the other end. And so we have started collecting those solids from community members and composting and bringing them here on site. And we're not the only ones who are doing that. There are other folks like out in Portland, Oregon. There's a community who does a similar thing. And we're realizing that is a strong element to develop in order to be even more prepared for upcoming disasters. If wastewater treatment plants are flooded and there's an influx of a need to process solids that are being developed, having a place that's already doing that and prepared to do that at scale feels really powerful. We are also really interested in expanding from urine into black water source separation. And potentially through like a vacuum flush system, but we're realizing that urine diversion by itself has application in certain areas, especially places that are facing huge eutrophication issues, like in Cape Cod. But then beyond that, without having a full system sanitation solution that can handle both the urine and the solids, it becomes quite limited. And then if we're able to unlock that piece, I think it can unlock some potentials in affordable housing and things like that. So we're excited to do that. Just in terms of the new communities, as I said, down Long Island Sound, down the Connecticut River to Long Island Sound, there's communities along that direction that we're supporting, and then up in the Lake Champlain basin area, we have a number of grants out there to try to create depots and projects in these areas. So hopefully those will come through. And then just a note, I'm sure many of you remember the recent flooding and the challenges that our waste streams faced during that time. So excitement on our end to be part of the resiliency effort in the future. Some ways to get involved. If you know of anyone or you yourself happen to live in the Brattleboro area, you're invited to become a urine donor. And we could, if you get in touch with us, we'll let you know all of what's involved in that. We invite you to attend an upcoming webinar, especially if you want to start using urine in your own garden. Reach out to us to schedule a tour for the next time that you're in Brattleboro. It's really different to be here and to see this technology in person. It's really fun, and to meet the team. Of course, to donate supportive funds is always welcome. And then we really invite you all to join for our global summit, which will happen this fall. This year, we're going to do largely virtual for a number of days, and then we're going to have an in-person component actually on Cape Cod, because that's where so much is happening right now. So I'll pause there. I know that's a lot of information, and I feel like I didn't even cover everything, but we'll pause here and open up to some questions. And Abe, if you want to, if there's a moment where you want to share about the PFAS and the soil health on those trials as well, if that's of interest to the team.
Yeah, the PFAS piece would be great to hear about before we start asking you questions about it. Share with us where you're at with that.
Sure, yeah. So PFAS is it's the forever chemicals, the fluorinated hydrocarbons like PFOA and PFOS, and they're of tremendous concern in waste recycling, in composting, in wastewater treatment, biosolids production. And that's what's precipitated a crisis in biosolids management in Maine, particularly, and also in other places. So we're very sensitive to the issue of PFAS in recycled urine, and we've been conducting PFAS tests for I think the last 2 years now. That was a new requirement of our permit from the state of Vermont, and we've been doing those annually. We are very happy with the results, because we have no detection whatsoever of any of the PFAS on the federal drinking water list of the most concerning PFAS, and so those are non-detectable. The only PFAS that we find occasionally is a very short chain one, PFBA, and we find that in the low parts per trillion range. So a similar level that you might find in drinking water, actually. And that's not one of the regulated ones of high concern, but it is one of the most ubiquitous ones. It's found in rainwater as well. And so much more of this is added on an acre of farmland per year from rainwater than is added from adding the urine-derived fertilizer. So those are all very encouraging to us. There is PFAS in practically everything, it seems, these days. So the question is how much PFAS is in it and how much of the material are we applying? And with both of those, urine is quite favorable. The levels are very low, and you only apply a small amount per acre. So the amount that goes onto farmland of PFAS from urine seems to be very small indeed compared to coming from other sources, including rainwater.
Interesting. Have you tested any of the solids that you've worked with?
Not yet. We're going to do that. Currently, we take them to a municipal recycling, municipal composting facility, and they do testing on their compost, but we don't test ours individually. We're working on doing composting ourselves at our facility, so we can make compost and then provide it for use within the community. And at that point, we'll definitely be testing every batch of that before it goes out.
And I do want to highlight that is a rare source material to be able to have
Right.
that
Right.
has not gone through any other waste streams. And so
Yeah.
we're actually quite excited to get that going and to test it.
Yeah, it's actually a significant thing we can be doing because there's no scientific literature at all. We've searched about levels of PFAS in human waste that's been collected, separated at the source. There's never been into a sewer and mixed with all the other wastes that go in the sewer. No one has ever studied what human waste has. They always just look at it combined in sewage because that's the standard way to manage it. And what we have found in the literature is not directly answering that, but it's triangulating on it, and it looks good. It looks as though there's very little PFAS coming out of the human body compared to all the other waste streams in wastewater. So we actually think that source separation of toilet water, of toilet wastes, is a much better way to handle human waste that will not intermingle it with all the high PFAS sources that feed into a sewer. So everyone, sorry, I shouldn't generalize to everyone, but generally, when people are talking about the PFAS issue in wastewater and in biosolids, they're saying, oh, it's coming from human waste, or it is human waste. It's not the same thing. There's human waste in sewage, but there are countless other things in sewage. And it seems that those other things are mostly where the PFAS comes from, including from within the household. If you're washing water repellent clothing in your dishwasher or in your washing machine, for instance, that can be a significant source of PFAS. And so we really want to disentangle what's the human waste, which is also the resource potential of fertilizer, and what are all the other wastes, because we think that the human waste is kind of being painted with a broad brush and a bad brush in terms of its PFAS content.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff that is likely the source is stuff we're adding intentionally
Right.
and not even not educated.
Yeah.
So that's both exciting and depressing. Can you articulate, well, I guess I'm curious what changes we possibly could contemplate to better support the direction you're headed from a policy point of view. But before you answer that, maybe what is your vision if you could reinvent the way that our communities deal with our waste today? What would that look like?
Great question. I'll take one pass at that. I bet you have other thoughts too,
Sure.
Marina. I think that one thing, what we're doing right now, installing source separation infrastructure in homes and in buildings, that we're doing that because we think that is a good path to take in the future, because it's a modest investment to put in toilets in a bathroom that divert all or some of the human waste into a tank that can be collected, pumped out, collected, and recycled. It's not too different from what we often do, especially in the rural parts of the state with septic tanks. The volume that you collect in a year of urine, for instance, is about 100 gallons per person. A septic tank might be 1,000 gallons. You pump it every few years, so it's a similar pumping schedule. And so urine diversion is one option. Another one that Jimena referenced that we really want to get into, that we think it would open a lot of doors in terms of improving the economics of wastewater treatment in Vermont, is full toilet waste separation. So using microflush toilets to flush all the toilet waste to a tank that can then be recovered and recycled as a resource, and then only the gray water goes down the drain to the septic tank. And there are a lot of benefits in terms of pollution, of pathogen pollution in small lots, like in towns or in tight developments, and also for nutrient pollution, for phosphorus and nitrogen. Most of that comes from the human waste, so we can separate that out. So that's what I see as as the future we're working toward is where we can integrate source separation into our built environment. So it's just the standard way of managing toilet waste.
And I can go ahead and add to that a little bit. I agree. I'm really proud of where we've come in the past little over a decade, and with urine specifically. And as I've been mentioning, really jumping into more of a full system solution really opens a lot of doors. And so what's exciting to me is to fully develop those solutions, including training for plumbers and contractors and whatnot to have a true solution that can manage all the waste. And I really see a powerful place being large buildings. So housing complexes, business buildings, stadiums, arenas, etc., where there's a huge influx of waste, and that actually create quite a bit of a burden on the wastewater treatment plant. I don't foresee in the near future replacing wastewater treatment plants. I see this as sort of assisting in the same direction, and easing the burden on those systems. A lot of our infrastructure in the whole country is really delicate and in need of adjustments, improvements, upgrades. And so to be able to elongate the life of those and to work alongside towards safety and nutrient reclamation feels really powerful. I want to add to this vision, though, that having this be something that is recognized by municipalities as beneficial would really be impactful. For this to be understood and studied and to be seen as an alternative or an addition compatible with septic systems, so that folks could have reduced leach fields essentially, or to have reduction in sewer hookup costs, because it's seen by municipalities as beneficial to the wastewater treatment plant to not have a new big building connected to the sewer in the same way. And so that's where I see the work that we're doing, and like the government and wastewater treatment plants being able to work together in that way.
Yeah, one of the promising avenues for this is villages that are constrained by wastewater, because of this issue of these historically densely settled villages, and we like our villages and we want to promote their vitality and their growth or infill, or not having sprawl of housing, yet they're not economical to sewer. And so there are issues of contamination from septic tanks with the fecal pathogens in the septic tanks contaminating drinking water, and sewers would be a solution to that, but they're often not economical. Introduction of systems where all the toilet water goes to a storage tank and then is removed for recycling elsewhere could accomplish a lot of what is needed in those villages, without having to have a central sewer, and do it more economically and protect human health, and potentially allow for further development of village centers. The regulations aren't currently set up for that to be a drop-in solution, because it's a different paradigm. It's not really what's been considered. There's soil-based systems and there's central sewers, and they're both envisioned that they would treat all the waste from a building. The idea of splitting waste into this more health impacting material, like the human waste, is what's dangerous, and it's also what can be more economic, what can be beneficially recycled. But splitting those streams apart, there's no category for that, and there's really no category for how that impacts the on-site septic systems or the density that can be settled. I think a lot needs to be figured out for that. I wouldn't propose that they should just arbitrarily change the rules X, Y, Z, because it has to be done in a science-based way and in a way that has the same rigorous protection of human health. But I think that there are potential for gains there, and that to realize those gains, regulations would need to adapt and advance in order to take into account the benefit of that source separation.
Other questions? Representative Glaber.
Thank you. In the concentration process, are you using some sort of evaporative or reverse osmosis to accomplish that?
Great
I
question.
love that question because those are both methods we considered, and we did not go with either of those. So when I was working on a National Science Foundation project at Rich Earth Institute, we were trying to figure out what is a good way to concentrate urine. We tried reverse osmosis. We had to stabilize the urine with acid immediately before it fermented. We still saw fouling of the membranes. It's a very fine membrane. So that was not practical in the settings we were working at. Evaporation takes a huge amount of energy. Also, the ammonia in urine is volatile. And so it's hard to retain that when you're evaporating it. Again, you have to use large amounts of acid, typically sulfuric acid. We found a little known process called freeze concentration or cryoconcentration. And it's a method of partially freezing any liquid that contains dissolved material and letting ice form. The ice is pure water ice. And then all the dissolved materials, in the case of urine, all of the dissolved nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, etc., are in that unfrozen portion. You can drain that out as a concentrated fertilizer. Then you're left with the ice. And you can melt the ice and then send out water elsewhere because you've captured the nutrients in the unfrozen fraction. It's something actually that I grew up doing because when we were sugaring, we'd pull the ice out of the sat buckets and throw it away because it doesn't have much sugar in it, and you boil down the remainder. And that same process works really for any aqueous solution like urine. And so that's what Brightwater Tools is now commercializing. And that's a process that is very robust because there's no membranes to foul, and it's energy efficient because freezing takes less energy than evaporating. And there's actually a system that even recovers the latent energy in the ice, latent heat in the ice, to make the system even more efficient. So that's why we went with freeze concentration. That's why the company got funding and why we've gotten investment, because it is a pretty novel approach to wastewater treatment.
Thank you. That explains the front end. The back end, you're using some sort of GAC filtering. Also mentioned in the slideshow was the use of biochar. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the University of Maine Orono campus is working with a company for the development of commercial biochar. That might be advantageous for you and not have to reinvent the wheel, because disposable of GAC cartridges or GAC bed can be very expensive.
We had a little bit of background noise over here. Can you repeat where you said? Maybe I heard-
UMaine Orono, you said?
Yes.
Okay, you heard it right. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, and
So-
for that, go ahead. Okay, the activated carbon, so there's two things. There's the activated carbon and there's also biochar, and we use them for different purposes. The activated carbon rather, we use as a finishing filter for the final fertilizer product. The biochar we use in a bioreactor column, so that is the medium on which microbes grow. And there is some contaminant removal from that as well, but it's primarily as a medium or substrate for the biofilter. In terms of the activated carbon, that is something that the Brightwater Tools offers. Not every customer uses that because it's not clear that it's necessary, but it's something that some customers want, some don't, some regulators may require it, others may not. The purpose of that pharmaceutical study was to quantify what the levels of pharmaceuticals really were in urine and how they behaved in the environment, what their fate was. And from those results, it doesn't really appear that that removal of those pharmaceuticals is necessary to keep the exposure levels similar to other things that are already out there in the environment. So it's not clear it's necessary, but it may turn out that is the way that regulators want to go, or customers or farmers want to go. So currently it's an optional add-on.
Thank you.
Representative North has a question.
Yes, thank you for this presentation and that vision that you presented of preventing the commingling of waste at the source. So the source separation is very interesting. We are, as you're probably aware, in legislature right now, working on a housing bill to promote housing, especially in concentrated areas. And I'm wondering, so what is the current reality or availability of source separating toilets and infrastructure for housing developments and apartment developments and things like that? And the associated collection systems and processing plants for all that. I mean, is that kind of background infrastructure already there and the products already there to be able to like go forward with this over the next 3 years?
I can start and then why don't you pick it up? I think pieces of that are, so there are toilets that exist that can accommodate this. And there are, like in Brattleboro, we're able to be a servicer, right, of these systems. And so we can come and collect. So you need a service element to be there. And so down in Southern Vermont, we are that. And in other places that would need to be developed, but that's not, the transport is not super complicated. The bigger challenge that I see actually comes back to that kind of to that septic or to the sewer and the collaboration with municipalities, because even if a home is using this technology, is source separating, they say they have a compost toilet or they have a urine diverting flush toilet that goes to a tank, they still need to pay full price to be on connected to sewer or to have an entire, there's very little reduction in leach field if they have a septic. And so in terms of incentives to do this, even though it has large implications, the incentives are not there. And so I'd say the technology is partially there, and then like how to actually get this going is the more challenging piece, and how to collaborate together to make that work. And that would be really exciting to work on, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The economic incentives are not entirely aligned right now, because the developer of the property or the owner of the building, in most cases, or in any case that we're aware of now, they're not seeing the benefit of, they're reducing the strength of their wastewater, but they're not being compensated for that service, essentially. So if that compensation could be set up, then that would be a lot more compelling. I would continue on what you're saying about service providing and the technology. There are two brands of urine diverting toilet currently on the market. There's one by a company called Wostman, another by Laufen, and they're both porcelain toilets. They're made in Europe, and they can be imported. So those exist, and Holland, like as Gina said, we could do that down here. There's a company in Burlington called Wasted that does that in the Burlington area. And if there were a demand for it, any septic hauler could have a dedicated tank and haul the urine. And there's a pathway in Vermont now regulatorily that we developed the first permit for it, and then we helped Wasted get their permit through the DEC. So processing and treatment and distribution of urine could be done anywhere in the state of Vermont. But yeah, it's the question of the economics and incentives.
So I noticed there's a few slides that you didn't have in your presentation, but are in the one you submitted about P-cycling around the world. Can you just like walk us through those at the high level of those projects? Because maybe one of those companies you just mentioned with the toilets is part of it, or how it works in a housing development looks like one of them.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I wonder if I should, do you guys have, I know we're a little over time. We have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me go back into my presentation. Okay, so if we back up, oh, I hid them, didn't I? Ha 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 ha. So I can't pull them up in my presentation because I hid them. Hang on. I apologize. 1 second. Okay, I'm having a hard time getting back to my presentation.
We have them in ours.
But
If you
I
can see
can-
them in yours.
Yeah.
We,
So
we could see, so you can talk us through. Yeah.
yeah, so there's one slide that talks about nutrient reclamation across the US, and there's a bunch of organizations that are on that map to show our partners or folks who are doing sort of similar-ish things here, but within the US, we're kind of all facing a lot of those similar challenges. In Europe, some projects to highlight is in Paris. There's 80% subsidy for urine diversion systems. They're realizing, similar to areas in the States, that they cannot be adding more nutrients into their waterways. And so the government is actually really supporting creating urine diversion systems and the infrastructure to do so. In Sweden, at that's Dasa, right? No, Sweden is Ricolab. Thank you. We were just there. In Sweden, at a place called Ricolab, they have an entire vacuum flush black water source separation system, and that's installed in apartment buildings and in a large hotel. And that all of the waste from that is brought into a processing facility and managed that way. And then there are AWOG, which is in Switzerland, is creating a concentrated urine fertilizer product called Orin, and they're doing it differently than Brightwater Tools with the freeze concentration. They're doing a different process, but it's more energy intensive, is my understanding, and expensive. And my understanding from talking to folks in Europe is the funding challenges are not the same, right? They have a lot more support from municipalities, from the government, and from research institutes, and then they also don't face the same sort of regulatory hurdles. And so they're able to move further and faster is my basic understanding. Yeah, and then I will also say that in Haiti, there's a program called Soil, and that's a community compost toilet operation where they're really providing sanitation in a way that doesn't exist. And so that's always a funny place for us is in the States, a lot of what we're doing is really the environmental protection piece. And without this full system solution element, we're not really providing a full sanitation option. But that's not always needed, except when we get into these housing conversations that actually becomes a need. Yeah, I feel like I did a very scattered idea of what's happening in Europe, but do you want to add anything to those?
I guess I would just add that a lot of what's motivating that work in Europe is a focus on circular nutrient economy. So the European directives on wastewater, I think maybe on agriculture, I'm not sure. They have an emphasis on moving from a linear model to a circular model. And that's not something that we really focus on regulatorily in this country at this point. It's more about just managing the levels of pollutants in effluent. And so that's the environment that we're working within and finding a place for urine diversion within. If this country shifts toward more of an emphasis on recycling versus disposal, then I think that will be an added push towards source separation and urine diversion, because it's so much easier to recycle nutrients when we've kept them in a uncontaminated and a high concentration fraction, rather than having it all mixed together, going down the pipe together.
Yeah. Representative Austin.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about your research source, like in terms of funding. Are you concerned about that? And where, can you just talk a little bit quickly about your research and, threats to it?
Yeah, so yes, the short answer is yes, we are very concerned. We have been heavily reliant on grants for the majority of pretty much for the whole time that we've existed. Last year alone, about 67% of our grant funding was tied in some way to federal dollars. At this moment, we have not had any issues accessing funds that are already under contract. But we are finding, we are concerned about going forward, about receiving the same number of grants, the same level of funds. And for the kinds of grants that we've been seeing over the past few years that have been really, really successful for us, those kinds of grants are about environmental protection, about resiliency, about things that really speak to what we're doing. And I think there's some concern that kind of language won't necessarily be in upcoming requests for proposals. And so doing a lot of thinking about how our work fits into a different narrative, if that's what's put out there. And then also doing just a lot of work on trying to diversify our funds. We do a number of things that are like fee for service and consulting and our portable toilet business. And so figuring out ways to expand that. But in terms of the research itself, that's hard to replace without grant dollars.
And a lot of our research has been funded by National Science Foundation, which funds a lot of really forward-looking, innovative projects that are technologically cutting edge. And so we've relied on that a lot. We received a lot of funding from them. Got notice recently that they have stopped issuing all grants until further notice. We had 2 proposals in with collaborators at the University of Michigan, 2 different proposals, and those proposals are both now on hold indefinitely. So yeah, we're quite concerned about the research funding.
Right. Another large funder, in addition to NSF, has been USDA Sustainable Agriculture and Research Education Programming. And so we haven't heard yet that those will not be happening, but we have concern about whether or not they will be. Those grants will be offered next year.
Thank you so much for your work and for sharing it with us.
Our pleasure. Thank you
for the
for
opportunity.
thank you for your interest and for your presence.
Okay, members, we have one more item on the agenda this morning. It starts at 11:30 with John Grove. So we will take a break until 11:30. And yeah. The VOCs, no.